If there is one thing I've learned in my time playing Warframe, is that while it is possible to have a generalistic frame which can be used everywhere, in reality for most situations you want to bring the best tool for the job. You want to bring that frame which offers an edge above all others when trying to solve a particular encounter. And if the encounter is infested, then in my opinion there is no better frame at shutting them down than the elegant Korra. Hello friends, Leo here. For the second episode of Squad Setup, allow me to show you how I play one of my favorite frames in the game, the elegant and kitty lover Korra. We will discuss what type of situations she excels in and what team compositions are effective and fun to play in arbitrations, but also highlight her strengths. Before we begin, I must warn you that I will talk about operator arcanes and focus schools later on in the video, which can be considered a spoiler if you haven't played through the Second Dream and the War Within main story quests. I will say in the video when I talk about these things, so you can skip ahead if you choose to. And I will also leave timestamps in the comments below to make it easier for you to navigate. Alright, from my experience and playstyle, there are three types of missions that I use Korra in. The first two being Arbitration, Survival and Defense against Infested, while the third one being the one that she really shines at, which is Excavation against any faction, but preferably infested. So let's begin by talking about what she brings to the table and how we can use that to create a squad that complements her. The first thing that Korra brings to the table is her signature kitty Venari, whom we will be using for healing. You see, while you can build Venari for damage, in practice she kills much too slowly to make any kind of difference, leaving her only viable as a healer. And that's not bad at all, because she can heal in a 10-meter radius around her decently enough. And since the whole team will be stacked together, she'll have no problem topping us off when need be. That being said, the ability we are mostly interested in is her fourth, called Strangledome. You see, Strangledome puts this dome of wires which attracts and traps enemies inside of it. The best part is that the enemies outside the dome will attack the ones caught inside, effectively making Strangledome a very formidable defense tool. The reason why it's so effective against infested is because they will basically walk inside the dome one after another, leaving themselves defenseless against your attacks. Technically, this can be used against other factions as well, but because they use ranged attacks, sometimes they might have enough time to shoot you before the Strangledome takes effect, which makes it especially dangerous at high levels and in arbitrations. Now, even though this ability is a very powerful defense tool, it does have a couple of weaknesses. The first one is related to the arbitration drones and the fact that it makes the enemies around it untouchable. Therefore, sometimes enemies affected by the Arbi drones might get inside the dome and attack you. However, Strangledome, unlike many other AoE abilities, seems to have a better time dealing with this. If your Strangledome range is high enough, then it's more unlikely for the drone to escort enemies all the way to you. Even though the enemies inside the dome are defenseless, the ones outside can still cast AoE abilities which at high levels can still easily kill you. In the end, the question is, what sort of squad can we build to patch up these weaknesses and create the functional synergy between the frames that can hold up to at least 1 hour inside the arbitration? Well, let's begin with some utility picks first. Spinova for defense and Desecrate Necros for survival. While you can substitute these picks for something else, in my opinion they bring some quality of life improvement that I value significantly. In defense missions, Spinova will reduce the time we spend per wave, by increasing the speed the enemies rush towards us and they get caught in Korra's dome. I know that making the enemies move and attack faster is counterintuitive, but in this scenario it works for us and not against us. In survival, Necros is self-explanatory. You need life support and he's the best frame in the game to give you that. With his comb, he can split bodies apart into multiple pieces, and each of those pieces are desecratable, potentially giving you more life support. Simply unparalleled. Technically, you can use a speed nova for survival missions as well, but Necros has a few defensive abilities which make him stand out. Namely Terrify, which is an AoE fear, and Shadows of the Dead, which can be used as a distraction. Okay, for our third pick we need a frame which can cover Korra's weaknesses, and that is going to be Volt. You see, Volt is quite a good pick for his electric shield. The shield not only gives 50% increased electricity damage, but also 200% critical damage multiplier when we shoot through it. The arbitration drones are part robotic and part shield, and the robotic part is weak against electricity. Therefore, stacking multiple shields together, up to 6, would cause the electricity damage to stack as well, but not the critical damage. Moreover, the shield can protect us from those AoE blasts coming our way, which is excellent. Another thing about Volt is that he can provide overshields to the entire team thanks to an augment with his 4th ability. Overall, Volt can provide a lot of defense, utility and damage, making him an ideal choice for this team composition. And finally, for the last pick, what should we get? Well, this is more of an options pick and it can be down to everybody's preference. In my opinion, we have plenty of defense from Korra and Volt, so we don't necessarily need a healing frame. Instead, we can further amplify our damage, and for that there are a few good options. One option will be, as always, the reliable buffing Rhino. It's hard to go wrong with him. He can provide between 150 and 200% ability damage and weapon damage, and his iron skin does come in handy when trying to revive fallen squad members. However, you can just as simply use our operator to revive people safely, so that's not that big of an advantage. Another option that in testing proved quite strong is Banshee with sonar build. You see, Banshee sonar is one of the craziest damage amplifiers in the game, creating stacking weak points on enemies, which often results in millions and sometimes tens of millions of damage. If you love crazy high numbers, then I highly recommend you try her out. However, there's a catch or two about Banshee. First of all, because of the arbitration shield drones protecting enemies, her sonar can be rather inconsistent. Of course, those who are not affected by a drone will get completely decimated, including those caught in Korra's Strangle Dome. Another catch is that Banshee has to constantly spam sonar in order to cover multiple parts of the body to actually have a chance of hitting those weak points. With the max efficiency build, you can get about 7 times damage multiplier on the weak spots, and you can pretty much spam the ability all day, every day. It's just that it's, well, not very exciting to play, but that is down to preference. Sitting there and spamming one button may not be that interesting to most people. And she also has a bit of crowd control, so that's a bonus. But now, what if I told you that there is a frame in the game who can provide the best of both worlds? What if I told you that this frame can not only give a damage increase to the team, but also a damage multiplier to the enemies, essentially making it the hot passion love child between Rhino and Banshee.
But Leo, is there really such a frame which combines Rhino-like buffs and Banshee-like damage multiplier?
Well, friend, I'm glad you asked. I got just the thing. Introducing the hottest frame in the game, who when running is setting the world on fire, but when she's standing still, she's setting her entire team on fire? Literally? For this squad setup, I present to you Ember, one of Warframe's most underrated frames.
But Leo, I heard from a friend who has a friend whose cousin brother also plays Warframe with the MK1 Prisma Breton Prime that Ember's AoE is actually worse than Disruption's reward. How do you comment?
Well, I don't know what Ember's AoE has to do with the rewards from Disruption, but it is true that Ember is constantly ridiculed for her left to be desired AoE. However, little did they know that Ember is actually a very potent support frame. Because you see, not only that Ember can give up to 300% increased heat damage to weapons and abilities to her entire team, but she can also multiply the heat damage enemies take by a magnitude of 4 or more. And also, I have fun playing her. That being said, there are a couple of annoyances about her first ability. You need to hit your squad members with your fireball in order to buff them, which can be quite difficult if they move around too much, but also the graphical effects left by it can be quite blinding sometimes, especially if you're all camping in a small room. It is not an issue in more open environments, however. So how do you play this team composition? Well, that is quite simple. You find a room to camp in, Cora casts her Strangledome and sets Venari on healing mode, Volt puts shields up and also uses Discharge to give everybody over shields, Nova spams Molecular Prime on cooldown, Necros activates Desecrate and occasionally uses Terrify if enemies get too close, and finally the one with the most work is Ember, who has to use her first 3 abilities to buff herself, the team, and to debuff the enemies. Maybe at this point you are asking yourself,
but why does Leo always camp in these missions? That is so boring.
Well, my friend, because of the way the spawning mechanic works, if you spread around too much, you will get very few spawns overall in survival missions. In defense missions, it will simply take longer to clear the waves since you'll be chasing enemies around instead of letting them come to you. And finally, Warframe abilities and items work best and synergize when close to one another. And also, someone does have to watch your back while you're on Facebook. Alright, let's talk about builds next. Starting with our best girl Cora, we have quite a few particularities that we need to discuss. First, to address the elephant in the room, as always, if you don't have Umbral or Prime versions of the mods, simply use the normal versions. The difference between them won't be enough to break these builds, so simply adapt to the mods that you have access to. Secondly, do not try to copy my builds exactly as you see them on the screen. Instead, I will do my best to explain my thought process behind them, and you can adapt them using your own preference and the mods that you have. Thirdly, and most importantly, I will leave my arcanes equipped just in case you are curious of what I was using. Arcanes are completely optional and not using them won't break the builds. They will simply enhance it. The arcanes that I'm using are purely preference based. They are neither the best or the most optimal, but simply what I prefer and what I like. Some people may see the fact that I'm using Umbral mods or Prime mods and arcanes as a way to flex on my audience, But just so you know, I have absolutely no interest in doing so. Instead, I'm trying to be as helpful and as informative as I possibly can. The rest is up to you. If you don't know where to obtain arcanes from, they can be obtained from capturing Eidolons on Earth's plains of Eidolon, and while it is something you can do from very early in the game, it's more of a late game activity where you bring an optimized loadout. Alright, let's start talking about the abilities and how we can enhance them to make them work in the squad setup that we've discussed. Starting with her bread and butter Strangledome, the most important stat to max out here is, in my opinion, efficiency. Because you need to keep this ability up at all times, and because you can place 2 separate instances of this ability at a time, you will be using a ton of energy. So in order to prevent ourselves from being drained out, building for 175 efficiency, which is the maximum, is smart. To achieve this, we use 2 rank 4 mods, namely Fleeting Expertise and Streamline. We keep them at rank 4 because combined they give exactly the 75% efficiency, which will cap it. Another important stat which helps with energy management is duration. The longer you can keep the ability active, the less energy you'll have to spend and the more breathing room you get. For this, we use Continuity and Ogre Message. The next one is Range. Range is a complicated stat for Strangledome. You see, if the range is too low, you'll have a problem with catching enemies fast enough or even at all. If the range is too high, enemies can get stuck in the environment, or the ceiling of the dome will be so high that you'll have a hard time hitting them with weapons or abilities. In my opinion, the ideal range is about 190%, which can be achieved with a single overextended mod. However, I am guilty of enjoying a higher range myself, so I sometimes replace Augur Message with Stretch. But this is down to preference. And lastly, Strength is the least important here. It affects the damage per second the dome deals to the enemies it catches, but the damage is so low relative to how tough the enemies are in Arbitrations that it doesn't matter in the slightest. I choose to keep the strength at over 100% because of the next ability, Venari. The strength comes from Intensify and Power Drift. Like we talked previously, Venari's only job is to heal the party, so we'll be keeping her in the healing stance. Her healing is affected by ability strength, and if you don't care about it, you can replace Intensify and Power Drift in the build with something else of your own choosing. Ensnare is a crowd control ability, one that I almost never use. However, it can be useful against some of the more dangerous enemies, such as Ancients. And finally, Whipclaw. I love this ability, but for it to function properly, you need to make a couple of adjustments in the build. First, its augment would decrease its damage significantly, even though it can work okay without it too. Secondly, you need to use a melee weapon for a stat stick, and therefore foregoing your melee weapon. If you don't know what that means, I will explain shortly. And lastly, this ability is affected greatly by range, but it doesn't go beyond 200%. That's why I said that around 190% is ideal. The best part about Whipclaw is that if you use it against an enemy trapped in the Strangledome, then all the other enemies who are also trapped will take 50% of that damage, making it quite potent. Okay, so now let's mention a few other things, starting with her augments. You see, all of Korra's augments are very good, and I especially enjoy using Venari Bodyguard for defense and Pilfering Strangledome for survival and excavations. Pilfering Strangledom will give you more life support in survival and more power cells in excavations, while Venari Bodyguard will allow Venari to die in your place. You can still respawn her with energy, or you can wait for her timer to run out and she will come back by herself. The last thing to mention are the auras. Having a dash polarity on the aura slot, allowing you to use corrosive projection and shield disruption, is essential. But if you have an aura forma, then steel charge can be useful for both whip claw or melee damage, and finally rifle lamp can boost the damage of your primary rifle. Now let's talk about the rest of the equipment, starting with Ignis Wraith. Ignis is my weapon of choice against Infested because it comes with innate heat damage. While the toughest enemies such as the Ancients are weak against corrosive, the majority of the Infested are weak against heat. So having both of them on your weapon will be very efficient at taking them down. It's important to build for high critical chance and low status chance because proccing corrosive is pointless. Infested don't have armor but damage reduction auras, so the corrosive damage itself will cause them to take more damage. Next, we need a strong single target weapon to destroy arbitration shield drones, and my weapon of choice for that is the Tomfinger Kid Gun. Again, the same thing I said earlier about prime mods applies to Rivens. Simply use what you have instead. You might want to build your weapon for high critical chance and low status chance, because not only that you get 200% critical chance multiplier from Volt's shields, but also the drones are immune to status effects. The melee weapon is purely preference based, and in my case I like to go with a Zaw for the AoE clear. But if you want to utilize Whip Claw, then you need a stat stick. For such, Venka is great. The reason why Venka is because it allows you to build melee combo multipliers faster with your Whip Claw, which does affect its damage. Now the question is, what is a stat stick? Basically, we are using this weapon's mods purely to boost the stats on the Whip Claw and nothing else. The Whip Claw takes the stats from these mods onto itself, but not from the weapon. Mod stats which affect the Whip Claw include critical chance, critical damage, status chance, melee damage, elemental damage, and combo duration. So again, the mods used here are only to help Whip Claw and not the Venka. That is why it's called a stat stick. While you can still use the Venka as a melee weapon, it's just not effective. As far as the companion is concerned, I recommend Worm because of his negate ability, which gives you status immunity. Infested use a lot of toxin status AoE clouds, so this will help you keep alive a lot longer. The best part about Sentinels, however, is the fact that you can use their weapons as a stat stick for your primary weapon by equipping the Vigilante set, which gives your primary weapon a 20% chance to enhance critical hits, which means that a yellow critical has a 20% chance to become one tier higher, therefore an orange critical. If you pay attention in the footage I've shown you, my Ignis does a lot of orange criticals, even though its critical chance is only 42%. Like I said previously, Venari's damage is inconsequential, so you may want to cheap out on building her, or maybe only give her some survivability mods. None of the mods that you can equip on her will affect her healing, so it doesn't matter too much what you do with her. Show her some kitty love or not, it's entirely up to you. A pro tip that I can give you about changing Venari's stances is that you can go to your options, and in the controls there is an option called Invert Tap Hold Abilities. You can play around with this setting and see how you prefer to change her stances more. You can either change by holding 3 and activate by tapping 3, or change by tapping 3 and activate by holding 3. Completely up to you. But just so you know, it also affects Ivara and Vauban. And finally, this is the part of the video where I talk about operator arcanes and focus schools, so feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps below if you don't want to hear this. So again, spoiler alert for people sensitive to story spoilers, please skip ahead. Alright, so the focus school that is typically the most useful is Xenuric's Energizing Dash. This creates a circle on the ground which gives you energy regen. For most frames which use some sort of efficiency mod like Streamline, this will be more than enough to give you the energy that you need. Combine this with Energy Pulse to give you a little bit of extra energy for each energy orb that you pick up. However, what we will be using later on for excavations is Vazarin for Protective Dash. This will heal your excavator in case it takes damage and also make it immune to damage for 5 seconds. Shout out to Lord Tentacles from the clan Phantom Vanguard and Krios Corvier from Twitch for helping me out with this information. As far as operator arcanes are concerned, having 2 Magus lockdowns will help you tremendously. Each of them deals 60% of the enemy's health as puncture damage, and as long as the enemy doesn't have any form of armor, damage reduction or shields, but pure health, then they will be one shot by this, regardless of their level. Therefore, sometimes you might want to take 4 corrosive projections or 4 shield disruptions to eliminate any armor or shields that the enemy might have. Infested Ancients have damage reduction auras, but if you catch them with Korra's Strangledome, their auras will cancel, allowing you to one-shot them as well. Let's briefly look at the other frames in a squad to see what builds they'll be bringing. Starting with Speed Nova. She only has one job, and that is spamming Molecular Prime on cooldown. What makes this ability speed up enemies is reducing her ability strength below 100%. For that we use 2 mods, Overextended and Power Donation. The range of the Molecular Prime is affected by ability duration and not ability range, and so we want to build as much duration as possible using Continuity, Narrow-Minded, Constitution, and Augur Message. For defense, we use a combination of Flow and Quick Thinking. This is a very effective defense mechanism as long as you keep your energy high. So to help with energy consumption, we will also be using a max rank Streamline. And finally, to help with boosting our critical hits, we will be using Vigilante Pursuit, which will increase our bonus to 25%. Once more, if you're concerned about not having arcanes, use what you have or don't use any at all. The energy in this setup comes from 2 places. Firstly, from Xenuric's Energizing Dash, and secondly, from a Sahasa Kubro. The Sahasa has this unique ability called Dig, which, whenever you are needing energy, she will dig up 3 energy orbs at most. These together will be plenty to keep you topped off. Additionally, and I recommend this for all frames, bring some energy pads. You can get the blueprint for the medium pads from the energy lab in your clan's dojo, and the blueprint for the large energy pads from the syndicates. Next up is the King of Loot Necros. His most important ability is Desecrate. This is what's giving the extra life support in survival missions, and this is what we're building around. First, we need to be using the Augment Despoil, which allows us to use life instead of energy for each corpse we desecrate. The reason we do that is because it's easier to work with a large health pool and heal ourselves than to constantly get energy from a small energy pool. Because how much life we use is affected by efficiency, it is imperative that we use at least one efficiency mod, and in this case, Fleeting Expertise. Because Desecrate is a channeling ability, the minus duration doesn't affect it. Next, we need to cover as big of a range as we possibly can, just to ensure that if teammates kill away from us, we can still desecrate the enemy's bodies. For this, we use Stretch, Overextended, Augur Reach, and Cunning Drift. This gives us an insane 70-meter radius on this ability. Because Terrify is a good crowd control ability, which we can use occasionally, I prefer not to dump my duration completely. As such, I'm using a continuity mod, but this is optional and you might choose to go for more defense instead. Speaking of which, having vitality is quintessential, and I'm also using adaptation for a big chunk of damage reduction. As far as weapons are concerned, you see, Necros prefers having weapons which have the slash damage the highest between impact, puncture, and slash. These will cause enemies' bodies to split into multiple pieces, each desecratable. But you see, there is a bit of a conflict of interest between our squad, which deals primarily heat damage, and Necros' Desecrate. Because heat damage causes bodies to burn to a crisp, you can't split them apart. However, in practice this isn't really an issue. Between Korra's Pilfering Strangledome and Necros' Desecrate, you won't have any trouble with life support. So the weapon of choice for Necros is usually Comb, because it's incredibly effective at breaking bodies. So if Comb is the one doing the killing, then there won't be a problem in the dismemberment department. Additionally, something like Piranha or Atherax are also good candidates for this job. Next on the list we have Volt. What we need him for is Electric Shield. Because he can place up to 6 shields, we need to make sure that he doesn't starve on energy too much. This is achieved by boosting the ability duration and efficiency. For duration, we use Continuity, Constitution, and Augur Message. For efficiency, a single Streamline mod will suffice. Now, Volt can also offer overshields by using his 4th ability, Discharge. This will damage enemies in an AoE, and when we pair it with the Augment Capacitance, we get some of that damage converted into overshields for the entire team. Because Discharge is affected by ability range and strength, we will use Stretch to boost the range and Intensify and Power Drift to boost the damage. Once again, because we'll be casting a lot, you may want to consider bringing Zenurik and a Sahasa Kubro to help with the energy. And finally, the catalyst of the squad, the girl who sets her team on fire, Ember herself, everybody. Right off the bat, let's talk about the augments which she uses to boost the damage of the team. First is Fireball Frenzy, which when we use her first ability Fireball on her teammates, they will receive a bonus heat damage to their weapons and abilities. This works like a Hellfire mod, and it does combine with other basic elements such as electricity to create radiation, for instance. We don't want that actually. We want to keep the heat damage because we will amplify it with her second ability. The augment for her second ability, Flash Accelerant, works in the same way, although unlike Fireball, Accelerant will also buff Ember as well. Both of these augments scale with ability strength, so you guessed it, we will be boosting that. Quickly going over the abilities, she will be using Fireball to buff her teammates using the augment, and only that. The damage from this ability doesn't scale and is therefore irrelevant. Fireball can also be charged, but you don't need to charge it in order to apply the buff. Next up, we have her most important ability, Accelerant. Not only does this buff the team with the augment, but enemies who get hit by it will take over 4 times more damage from heat, which will completely melt them. Let me show you. This is the damage without Accelerant. Now this is the damage with Accelerant. Don't blink. And finally, her third ability, Fire Blast, creates a fire circle around her, and as long as she shoots from inside of it, she gets plus 50% heat damage, which does stack with multiple Fire Blast casts. However, I don't typically keep more than 1 stack at a time. So how do we build her? Well, because she'll be constantly spamming 3 abilities, having maximum efficiency is non-negotiable, so we'll be using a rank 4 Fleeting Expertise and Streamline. Now, because we are casting buffs, we need to ensure that their duration is respectable, so we use Constitution and Augur Message. And finally, the potency of the buffs is reliant on ability strength, so we squeeze in as much as we can with Augur Secrets, Intensify, and Power Drift. And that is that. I personally had a lot of fun with this setup, so I highly recommend that you try it out as well. However, to be perfectly honest, it does take some time finding strangers to join you, especially when they hear about Ember, because how the general consensus is that she's bad. If that's the case, then you can always substitute her with Rhino, Banshee, or something else that you enjoy. But aside from that, when this setup fires on all cylinders, it's bloody glorious. Okay friends, so we finally get to Korra's bread and butter, excavations. To me, Korra is pretty much synonymous with excavations nowadays, and there is a good reason why. So far in the video we have discussed about her strengths and weaknesses, so by now you should have a pretty good idea of what those are. In order to paint the whole picture, let's go over them again. So Korra's Strangledome can be cast in 2 instances, and she'll be placing them around the excavator and keeping them up at all times, providing excellent defense. I recommend that you place them before and after the excavator and not on top of it if you can help it. This is not only because it keeps the enemies at a bigger distance away, but it also traps the enemies sooner before they get in range to attack. Because you see, even infested have AoEs which they can throw at a distance. The second thing is to make sure that you use Pilfering Strangledome to sometimes get 2 power cells from the carriers. As such, let the carriers get caught in the dome before you kill them. Unlike normal excavations where you need 4 power cells to fill 1 excavator up, here you will need 8, so having additional ones spawned to prevent stagnating at 0% power is quintessential. The third thing is that Venari can not only heal players, but also objectives, excavators included. To do this, aim at the excavator and press your third ability while Venari is in her healing stance. If you do it correctly, you should see her running in circles around the excavator. Because she offers defense, more power cells, and heals the excavators, Quora is your one-stop shop for this mission type. However, because the enemies can sometimes sneak past the dome, shoot it from a distance, or throw AoEs on top of it, we need another frame to offset this. In the other mission types we used Volt, but here we need a 360 degrees of defense, and therefore Frost is perfect. Just like Quora's Strangle Dome, Frost's Snow Globe is a deployable object, so if the frames themselves get hit by a nullifier bubbles against Corpus, these abilities won't cancel. Because the enemies can't shoot from outside the bubble, they'll try to get inside. On their way, they will get caught by Quora's Dome. If they do get inside the bubble, they have a chance to become frozen. But sometimes at high levels, if Quora's Dome isn't present, it is possible for the enemies to sneak inside the bubble and one-shot the excavator. After all, neither of these two frames have the perfect answer individually, but together they put up one hell of a defense. Now, because you can do 2 or 3 excavators at the same time, the squad setup for this will be 2 pairs of Quora and Frost. From my experience, you can go up to about 24 or even 32 digs before the enemies become so strong that they start to one-shot you. And it is at this point that you need to bring more to the table if you want to continue. Now we will be talking about operators again, so spoiler alert. Previously I showed you that having 2 Magus Lockdown Arcanes equipped on your operator can one-shot enemies without armor, shields, or damage reduction. If you don't know where to buy Magus Lockdown from, you need to go to Fortuna. In the back room you need to talk to Little Duck while you are in the operator form. 2 full sets of lockdown will cost you 200,000 reputation, but it's more than worth it. And in order for you to unlock the back room, you need rank 5 with Solaris United, so that's a bit of a grind too. To remove the armor from Grenier, you need to use 4 corrosive projections or 3 corrosive projections together with 3 coaction drifts across the whole team. The same goes for shields against Corpus, except that you'll be using shield disruption. Against infested, most of them aren't protected, but if ancients come with their auras, they usually lose it when they get caught in Quora's Strangle Dome. It's a bit finicky, so it might not work all of the time. Also, if you have Vazarin with Protective Dash, using it to heal the excavator is very good. The way you play this is pretty simple. You use Strangle Dome and Snow Globe to protect the excavator, you park your frame inside the Snow Globe to keep it safe in case your operator takes the damage, and you spread the love with Magus Lockdown. You can destroy arbitration drones with your operator ramp. If any of your squad members die, use your operator to destroy the Arbi drones and collect the shards. Do not use your Warframe or you will most likely get one shot yourself. I see this happen all the time. So I believe that about covers it. Now let's look at the Frost build real quick. The main ability that we care about here is Snow Globe. To make this bubble real tanky, you need high armor and ability strength. Additionally, using the Augment Chilling Globe is highly recommended as it sometimes freezes the enemies who enter the bubble. So we increase the armor with Steel Fiber and ability strength with Intensify, adding a bit of range with Stretch to make the bubble's radius a bit larger won't hurt anyone. To manage our energy, we use flow and streamline. And finally, continuity is here only to boost the duration of freeze, just in case you need some extra CC. There are a few extra things to know about Snow Globe though. Firstly, they are permanently placed in the world up to 4 instances, so you can potentially cover multiple excavator spawn locations. Secondly, recasting this ability in the same place will cause it to stack in health, making it a more durable defense. Doing so will only count as 1 instance placed. And with this, I believe we have finally covered everything. Before we end the video, I want to thank you guys for watching, and if it helps at least one person, then I consider it a smashing success. If you want to see these builds in action, then come visit me on my Twitch channel where I run arbitrations regularly. And finally, if you leave a like on this video, then I will personally gift you a second orbiter. That's right, this is not a scam. The way you claim your second orbiter is to go on a mission, and when you come back you'll be picked up by your brand new orbiter. As an extra bonus, I'll make sure to paint it in the same way as your current orbiter, so you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy your new orbiter. You will be able to smell the fresh paint on it. This way, you'll be one step closer to realizing your deepest dream of becoming a Starfleet Admiral. This is not a joke. All you have to do is leave a like on the video. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you're having a good day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.